You are not allowed to have brown cabinets. You are not allowed to have a Roku TV. You are not allowed to have toothbrushes in your bathroom because of boo-boo air. You are not allowed to have a white refrigerator.
Stay in the box! No! Stay in the box! No! Get out of my skin!
I interrupted guys' night, and it led to me getting passed around by them. I went over to the apartment of this guy that I've been seeing. He had told me earlier in the week that he was going to have the guys around that evening, but I had totally forgotten. So when I turned up and all of his friends were drinking in the living room, I was surprised. It was all guys, 5 of them, all drinking and chatting together. As soon as I stepped into the room, I felt I was walking into some place I wasn't supposed to be. They welcomed me in, but I was teased for interrupting their guys' night. It was playful, though, like they were joking. Still, it felt transgressive already to be there in this space where women were normally excluded, and they relaxed into a state that I don't think the women in their lives normally saw. I sat on the lap of the guy I've been seeing, feeling the eyes of the other guys on me. The guy I've been seeing was stroking me, touching me in ways that felt more sexual than he would normally do in public. I think he was already starting to show me off to his friends. He even started to joke about how slutty I am, a joke I went along with, and teased me that I maybe turned up for some fun. I didn't disagree with him, still going along with the joke, but I didn't really believe anything would happen.
That's a positive example of boys will be boys. Picking up heavy stuff for old people. In the 8th grade, while on a week-long school camp trip to a mountain resort, the boys and girls were put in separate cabins. At around 11 p.m. our teacher came to say goodnight and check on us. He walked in on us in the midst of duct taping a volunteer to the ceiling beams, all of us in our boxers, for some reason, and cackling wildly at our success. We wanted to see if the tape would hold him, and it did. Our teacher, who had just come from disarming a very heated and dramatic conflict in the girls' cabin, just cocked his head, asked the volunteer if he was okay, then told us to remember to cut him down before bedtime and left us to our chicanery. The camaraderie and high-fiving from that day is still with me 20 years later. Boys will be boys. When we all throw rocks into the water to make big splashes. Any boy in the room will stop at nothing to open a jar. Kept hearing loud smashing noises outside my window followed by delighted, sports game type screams. I went to see WTF was going on and the frat house across the street has set up lawn chairs across from a house being demolished. Every time the demolition crew got a big chunk smashed, the guys would jump out of their chairs screaming and clapping. The demolition crew looked fucking delighted by the attention and the guys stayed there watching and cheering until the whole house was torn down. Genuinely one of my favorite college memories. Lamau. My 48-yo dad and his boys are watching Shrek on Netflix party and arguing about who is the Shrekiest.
I got hit on by 2 guys at the bar. An hour later, both of them had CM med in my SS. I was sitting at the bar, waiting for a friend, when the first guy, Mark, approached me. He was around my age, taller than me, good looking. He asked if he could get me a drink, and since my friend was running late, I accepted. We chatted for a while, and he was charming enough for me to decide that if my friend didn't show up soon, Mark would take me home. Then Mark got a call, and he excused himself to take the call outside the bar. At that time, I got a text from my friend apologizing for having to bail out on me. I was more than happy to accept her apology. Then, the second guy approached me. He, Jim, said he had just seen my previous companion leave me and was wondering what was wrong with that guy. I laughed and told him he was just on the phone and he would be back. Jim lightheartedly cursed his luck and asked if at least he could buy me one drink. Since I was running a little dry, I accepted. We chatted for a while, and then Jim left me with my drink. Since Mark was taking a long time to come back, I checked with the bartender to make sure everything was paid up and stepped outside to see if I could find him. He wasn't outside the bar. I looked around the street, but he was nowhere to be seen. I think Jim saw me walking up and down outside the bar, and he came out to see what was going on. I told him that my potential date seemed to have disappeared. He commiserated with me, and just a few minutes later, we were walking arm in arm through a nearby park. Jim pointed out that the park had a small hill, and the view from the benches there was great. I didn't find out if that was true because once we got to the bench, I was sitting on his lap, kissing him. Jim had one hand on my SS and the other on my right breast. I could feel him hardening under me, and I broke the kiss and slipped off his lap. Kneeling on the wet grass, I undid his pants and got his pee-pee in my mouth. Jim held my head, sometimes pushing as I sucked him into my mouth all the way down. I reached down and pushed my panties aside to play with myself as I sucked him. After sucking his pee-pee for several minutes, I wanted to be effed. So I stood up, intending to ride him. But Jim stopped me. He told me he didn't have a CNDM. I told him that was fine, as I was on birth control. Jim said the last time someone told him that, 9 months later, he was a dad. That kind of took the wind out of my sails. First, a guy disappeared on me, and then I found the only guy in the vicinity who had qualms about having intimacy. Right then, I desperately wanted to get effed, so without thinking much about it, I asked in that case if he would be willing to F my SS. Jim was willing.
I'm in love with my own grandmother. Ever since I was a small boy, I wanted to take her to Pound Town.
My family recently got very awkward. It was one time after school when I got home and I was very tired, but I heard a commotion upstairs. I burst into the room upstairs only to find my parents getting it on. I didn't know what to do, so I joined in. It was going surprisingly well, only when I turned to my left and saw my sister standing in the doorway.
Why I'm only friends with grasshoppers. When I was 4 years old, I was bullied and all the kids all around me used to say, "Why don't you bounce away, you fat cunt?"
I found a portal gun and I've been having sex with myself. I am my own mother. Before I was born, my dad had sex with me, and then I gave birth, and then I gave birth to myself.
Morning, sir. How can I assist you? Sir?
Did I get in the wrong line?
No, this is the right one, sir.
You asked me if I need assistance. That implies that I need a service. I'm not here for a service. I'm here to purchase a product. I am here to purchase coffee.
Oh, well, I do brew the coffee for you, which is a service.
No, not necessarily, because if you had a self-serving option, then I would just go ahead and do that. But I'd still be purchasing the product, which is what I'm trying to do.
Okay, would you like to buy a coffee?
Okay, now we're making more sense. All right, I'll have the Robusta variety.
Okay, great.
Do you know where that's from?
This one's from Gambia, sir.
Okay, all right, you're redeeming yourself a bit.
So happy to hear that.
And I'll have that at pH 6.
Oh, like pH level? So you want milk, or?
Yes, that's what that means.
I used to pay my middle school bully not to bully me, then I found out he actually needed the money. He made my life a living hell. He would turn all the boys in class against me and bully me about my eyebrows. One time he begged me to buy him pizza and said he promises not to bully me all week if I do. So I bought him a box of pizza and he fulfilled his promise. I loved the idea. I began to do it on a regular basis. I started asking him every Friday what he wants next week so that the bullying doesn't happen again. He asked for 2 bags of hot fries, a potato chip flavor here in the US, and another time he wanted some milk from the cafeteria. And once he asked for colored pencils for art class. My school had a uniform dress code. It was $25 per shirt and the pants were $15, if I remember correctly. He showed up the first day of 8th grade in regular clothes, a tee and jeans. So he got sent to the main office to wait for his parents. My aunt was there because she used to drop off my lunch and hand me money to buy food after school. She saw him upset and asked what's wrong, and he starts crying lightly. His parents wouldn't come because they couldn't afford the uniform and decided it would be best to avoid the situation. After my aunt hands me my lunch, she buys him a uniform hoodie, a couple of tees, and a long sleeve. He said he had pants at home and he was hesitant to accept, but eventually took them and thanked her. Now, 13 years later, he runs a nonprofit that has something to do with kids receiving books. I think it's sweet and I forgive him for being a bully because he didn't grow up to be in a hole like most bullies.
What's a positive example of boys will be boys? Picking up heavy stuff for old people. In the 8th grade, while on a week-long school camp trip to a mountain resort, the boys and girls were put in separate cabins. At around 11 p.m. our teacher came to say goodnight and check on us. He walked in on us in the midst of duct taping a volunteer to the ceiling beams, all of us in our boxers, for some reason, and cackling wildly at our success. We wanted to see if the tape would hold him, and it did. Our teacher, who had just come from disarming a very heated and dramatic conflict in the girls' cabin, just cocked his head, asked the volunteer if he was okay, then told us to remember to cut him down before bedtime and left us to our chicanery. The camaraderie and high-fiving from that day is still with me 20 years later. Boys will be boys. When we all throw rocks into the water to make big splashes. Any boy in the room will stop at nothing to open a jar. Kept hearing loud smashing noises outside my window followed by delighted, sports game type screams. I went to see WTF was going on and the frat house across the street has set up lawn chairs across from a house being demolished. Every time the demolition crew got a big chunk smashed, the guys would jump out of their chairs screaming and clapping. The demolition crew looked fucking delighted by the attention and the guys stayed there watching and cheering until the whole house was torn down. Genuinely one of my favorite college memories. Lamau. My 48-year dad and his boys are watching Shrek on Netflix party and arguing about who is the Shrekiest.
What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride do at her wedding? Ask money to fund their expensive honeymoon. A close friend of mine wanted a grand honeymoon after their wedding. She got these ideas on social media, where people spend a week in the Bahamas. She is an aspiring Instagram influencer and would do anything to look expensive. She even shared how excited she is for their Bahamas trip and even shared to her followers, where they will stay at a 5-star hotel. The time she is getting close to her wedding, she sends us a registry link to the products she wants. Wedding registry is basically a wish list for wedding couples, and they send it out to their guests who wish to give them a gift. Anyway, her registry was absurdly expensive. She listed a lot like a $3,000 coffee machine. None of them drink coffee, and $3,000 Hermes blankets. I thought she was out of her mind until the wedding, where at the reception, she told everybody that they will pass a little bucket for us to put cash to fund their Bahamas trip and that it is mandatory. She wants it fully paid off, and it was a total of $12,000 trip. I was shocked because looking at the guests, none of them were willing to fund the trip. I found out they only got $300.
My music hits me so hard, makes me say, oh my Lord, thank.
Fine! What's 17 more years? I can always start again. Make another kid.
Hey bro, I'm so sorry, man. You're good. My fault.
Reddit. Am I the asshole for wanting to tear these two guys in Walmart into shreds? But instead of resorting to violence, I tracked down where they live and I burned down their house.
That's not what happened.
Well, I'll be. Feller, looks like you struck it rich.
Nonsense. You've been panning out here all morning. Friend, I reckon this here belongs to you.
Oh, sir, I couldn't.
Nope, I insist.
Well, thank you for the gold, kind stranger.
Wow, a 4-leaf clover. This must be the luckiest day of my life.
What was the cringiest thing you did in your first relationship? Dude gave me a necklace with a little diamond family and a heart with our 2 hypothetical children who he had named James and Jasmine. I wore it for 2 days before I returned it. I was 15. My mom cried. Same guy, we were getting into a heavy makeout session in my parents' basement when I looked up and saw my mom behind him. I was not wearing pants. He ran out the back door while I awkwardly dressed myself. My mom cried. Same guy lost my B card to him and he had covered my parents' guest bedroom with rose petals and lit candles. Whipped cream was involved. I thought I had cleaned everything up but missed some whipped cream on the comforter which my mom thought was dried bodily fluid. A lot of it. Guess what? She cried. Same guy, we were doing the deed in the shower at his parents' house and his mom came home unexpectedly. Had to come downstairs and explain why I was showering at their house. She called my mom, who cried and then had a group meeting with both sets of parents telling us that we were moving too fast and talking about safe intimacy. Same guy, his dad, walked in while we were watching a movie and fooling around under a blanket. The dude very obviously keeps going while having a full-on conversation with his dad. His dad winked. Same guy. We were in my bedroom and my parents were supposedly at the lake. Car pulls up and he jumps out of my second-story bedroom window to avoid my dad, who searched the entire house for him afterwards. He couldn't play baseball that week and the coach, also my English teacher, was very mad at me. Same guy. We were doing the deed in the baseball field dugout late one night when a couple nonchalantly walked by, pretending they did not see us. Same guy. We were fooling around in the backseat of my car at a local park in the woods and had completely fogged up the windows when a man tapped on the door and told us to knock it off. Turns out it was my neighbor. Same guy. We broke up and for some reason my parents felt bad for him so they let him in with flowers and he slipped them petal by petal under my locked door for 2 hours while trying to convince me to get back together, all while my parents and his dad were sitting in the living room. Same guy. After he followed me around school for weeks I had guys volunteer to guard me from him. He ended up leaving school over it. Same guy. I got married, we had broken up about 11 years prior at this point, and he texted me on my wedding night saying things like what if we had gotten married. We probably have James and Jasmine by now. I did not answer. I am still married 4 years later and he still reaches out periodically.